Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well and you're at home comfortably. My name is Iván Muck and I'm a UX researcher at MKB Fintechlab, and I'm going to be your host during the webinar. The webinar will start for about 2 hours, and as you may know, besides getting rich with business, product strategy and design insights, you will be the witnesses of a live UX audit and redesign of a Neobanks website. About the details of the agenda, our wonderful presenters will talk about. Please feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts in the Zoom Q&A regarding the webinar's topic, and our presenters will make sure to answer them after the presentation. Shall we begin, Iván?
Yeah, let's. And thank you so much, Eva. It's been an honor to be here and jump on a webinar session also with my two triplets, Iván Muck and Ferenc Muck, as well as an amazing UX researcher and designer, Krisztina Szeróvay. So first off, I'll share with you our presentation, and we'll be first and foremost introduce ourselves for you before actually diving into the presentation with lots and lots of special insights in the world of neobanks. I have the honor to introduce you Krisztina Szeróvay first and foremost. She's an amazing UX researcher and designer, and apart from that, she's also a true influencer and educator in the field of UX. Her Sketching for UX course online is a really, really great hit. And also she's been having thousands of UX researchers and designers with her UX knowledge base as well. She's also a really, really fun person. She's into board games, video games, lots of other types of games. And it has been a true honor to work with her on this webinar session together.
Oh, thanks so much, Iván, for this really nice introduction. And now I would like to say some words about my friend Ferenc Muck. He started out as a visual designer, and nowadays he works on solving fintech problems with a strong focus on UI design. And he founded and leads a comprehensive UI design course called UI Academy. And his latest big challenge is building a family-focused neobank in the UK. And as a head of design, he currently leads a team of 5 designers. And some years ago, he was a guitar player who liked running. And nowadays, it's quite the opposite. He's a runner who sometimes plays the guitar.
Yeah, thanks, Krista. So my chords are really bad nowadays, but yes, I can run. So hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce my twin brother, actually my triplet brother, Iván Muck. Actually, we co-funded ff.next back in 2017. And nowadays we are also building Strive together. We aim to launch in 2021 in the UK with a new niche neobank. I mean, Iván is also a big foodie when he's not working, and his background is analyzing fintech. So before actually co-funding family finances, Iván was busy analyzing lots of fintech companies.
Thank you so much, friends. So let's get to our webinar right now. We are going to give you a really thorough overview on fintech and neobanks today. And it's not only going to be a general overview, it's going to be a overview with lots of special insights. Then Krisztina Szeróvay is going to provide you with an amazing tool to analyze user interfaces. It is called UX Audit. Afterwards, she will be sharing with you some great and not so great examples from the biggest players. And then we'll dive into Revolut's business as well as strategic implications with lots of actionable insights. And then we are going to show you really in a broken down manner Revolut's product. And we will show you bits and pieces of that. And we will be having a live redesign today brought to you by Ferenc and Krisztina at the end of our webinar session. So let's start our webinar with the first point. Let's get to what is fintech today. And I do not want to give you a definition of fintech. Of course, we know that it's financial technology. And we are going to talk about fintech today as fintech companies, all the fintech companies out there, not only fintech startups. And as you might know, that fintech became mainstream in 2015. there was a huge peak in Google trend searches, but we can also say, and one could argue, that already in the 19th century, there was fintech out there with the first transatlantic cable deployed between 2 continents, and financial services data was shared. Afterwards, we could also argue that with the first ATM deployed in 1967, the digitalization of banking truly became and truly started. In Hanover Trust manufacturing document, we could saw also that the fintech word was firstly used, and also we might remember the Black Monday stock market crash, when fintech was actually causing lots of problems already. And in the American Banker magazine, we could also see Citibank's fintech program. But of course, the real trend talking about fintech as such began in 2008 and 2009 after the financial crisis. Also, it's really important to understand fintechs by actually firstly trying to classify these companies. And firstly, you could classify fintechs by diving into the B2B and B2C sphere. There you can see a great trend in B2B fintechs. So there used to be a lot more B2C fintech startups before 2019, but then a trend came, and there lots of startups and other fintech companies recognized the sustainability, profitability aspects, as well as being able to leverage incumbents marketing channels as well. So B2B is currently rather the leading trend compared to B2C. And also you can see CB Insights, the State of the FinTech Q2 2020 report. They have 8 main categories where they classify fintech, from payments through wealth management to real estate related fintech solutions. But what's really important to see actually that there are a lot more categories in terms of fintech classification. In, for example, CB Insights fintech top fintech 250 report. They have 19 main categories. So there are lots of different sorts of categories, and also subsegments and sectors where fintech is involved. And you could also ask, is fintech really everywhere? And some say yes, fintech can be everywhere. And one of the most popular Silicon Valley-based venture capital firms, Andreessen Horowitz, and their general partner, Angela Strange, said in January 2020, this year, that in the not so distant future, every company will be a fintech company. And this is implied not because it's so easy to be a fintech company, but actually to roll out a financial services product or financial service, it's becoming quicker, cheaper, and easier due to the concept of banking as a service. And I'll be talking about banking as a service later on. It's a really important concept and notion, and we'll be building on that. And that's a concept that's being leveraged by lots of neobanks in the world globally. So we've been talking about fintech. Let's get to what these neobanks are that we are going to X-ray during today's session. In order to understand neobanks, we have to look at key characteristics of these neobanks. Of course, the first one is definitely a quite obvious one. These are digital-only financial institutions without any physical branches. It doesn't mean that they are licensed financial institutions. We'll also get there. But what's really important that these are digital-only organizations, meaning that via an application, they are operating, and via another digital channel, they are operating, but without any physical branches. They have cloud nativeness in their approach and mindset. It means that actually they are leveraging microservices architecture, containerized environments, and so on. What's also really important that they have design at their core. It means that their design-driven approach and UX-focused digital product building approach places design as a central decision maker and not a vendor in the organization. Furthermore, they are leveraging the banking as a service, modular banking infrastructure, so they can roll out pretty easily new financial services solutions. Krisztina, one of the most important influencers in the space, shows us that neobanks are a direct challenge to the status quo of established traditional banks. And also it's really important that they have a lower cost structure due to the modular setup of their infrastructure and without having to deal with legacy systems. And also they have hyper-personal customer experience, which is also implied by the fact that they have design at their core. Further on, we have a great overview by FT Partners, a great M&A advisory in the fintech space, that there are more than 250 plus neobanks out there in the world, in all of the continents of the globe, and there are 350 million customers acquired already by these neobanks. We have also a number of 16 unicorn neobanks. It means that these neobanks are valued at least $1 billion, and they are privately held companies yet. That's an amazing number. And also talking about the European space, there will be 80 million customers acquired by neobanks in 2023. Further on, by FT Partners, we can also see, and that's a kind of reassurance that yes, these neobanks are mobile-centric neobanks and organizations. They have so-called PFM tools also at their core, personal financial management tools, which are really must-have and fundamental solutions of these neobanks. And these solutions are not really massive solutions, unfortunately, amongst incumbents and traditional banks. And also, they can leverage customer data in a lot better manner, since they use more modern infrastructure bits and pieces that I will be also talking about later on today. There's a huge issue regarding challenger banks' valuations. These are really insanely skyrocketing. It means that these challenger banks have right now valuations of really above the unicorn valuation. Revolut is having a $5.4 billion valuation. But of course, these organizations are venture capital backed organizations. So their valuation differs, of course, from traditional banks, for example, market capitalization approach or total asset approach. In case we look at, for example, the market capitalization of the biggest, largest US bank, JP Morgan, they have above $300 billion market cap. So it's, of course, a lot larger sum. But these fintech companies are not really far from, for example, Goldman Sachs with 70 billion, or, for example, I would mention Deutsche Bank with 17 billion market capitalization. I've been talking a bit about banking as a service, and I really want you to understand the banking as a service principle here. Because, for example, Monzo, Revolut, and Chime, Monzo and Revolut from the UK, Chime from the US, they told customers that they are already neobanks in 2015 and 14 respectively, but they didn't really have a licensed infrastructure. They didn't have their own infrastructure to issue cards. They could start with card issuing and payment processing companies like Wirecard, GPS, or Galileo in the US. And afterwards, they had time to actually be granted a banking license in the UK or in the US. It's really interesting to see how Monzo got their banking license in the UK. Revolut is still dealing with the UK banking license. They just started applying in March 2020. They already have a Lithuanian banking license, which we are definitely going to talk about. And Chime is not yet licensed, in a sense that in the US, there was going to be a fintech charter amongst the regulators by the OCC, but then the New York City Department of Financial Service attacked this fintech charter. So it's not that easy to get, as a neobank, a license, a banking license in the US. That's also a really interesting topic there. We'll be also mentioning that as well. So as a neobank, you can be the cherry on top of these infrastructure providers. You can only be the brand, you can only be the front end, and you can deal with, of course, marketing, customer support, etc. But you can put together bits and pieces of the banking as a service infrastructure with license holders, a general ledger, compliance vendors, etc. We've been talking about these neobanks a bit, but it's really, really important to also mention their supposed business models. And I brought to you a really interesting structure, but you can see that there are really different approaches in terms of neobanks business models. For example, the ecosystem-led approach is a really interesting one, also applied by Revolut, that they start out with, for example, a debit card, and they build the whole offering around that with other financial services products. The interchange-led approach is there when payments are the most important revenue streams, also card payments, merchant payments, etc. And then the fintech startup is not really building around a huge ecosystem like Revolut is doing that. The credit-led approach is the, I would say, most obvious one. For example, Starling Bank is moving into that space because they are rolling out SME loans and other types of loans. And this is going to be supposedly the main revenue stream for that particular fintech player. Asset-led approach is implying savings as well as investments products as main and core products of these fintech players. And product extensions are relevant once a fintech builds an ecosystem and also touches upon other sectors, like actually Revolut is doing, and we are also going to talk about that later on. And we've been talking about these players, and I really want you to see who these players really are. And I'm going to share you a really quick snapshot from the documentary of 11FS, just to show you the main players in the UK. Sharing my screen now, and you should be able to see this video.
Here at Monzo.
My name's Anne Bowden. I'm CEO and founder of Starling Bank.
My name's Tom Blomfield. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Monzo Bank.
Rishi Khosla, CEO and co-founder of Revolut.
I'm Nick Soronsky, CEO and founder of Revolut.
So you saw the some of the biggest players in the UK. I'll just get back to our presentation. And yeah, we ended with Nick Soronsky, co-founder and CEO of Revolut. We'll talk about him as well today. And moving forward, what's really interesting is the future that neobanks will supposedly have. And I really want to break down two, I would say, misconceptions about the future of these players. First and foremost, I really do not like when during conferences it's being mentioned that players in the fintech space and in the neobanking space are not going to be profitable at all, because this is definitely a lie. And of course, there are lots of players out there in the UK like Revolut, Monzo, Monetization, also in Germany, N26, Bank from the Netherlands, that are not profitable right now, but they might become profitable with their unit economics and also better cost structure than traditional banks. And also there are lots of really, really great neobanks out there that are already profitable, like Oak North in the UK, like Ferratum from Helsinki, like Tinkoff is super app concept coming from Russia. So definitely there are already fintechs that can deal with also short-term profitability. Also, it's a really, really great example to see Starling Bank, since Starling Bank is going to have its first profitable year in 2020, despite the global pandemic. And this is because they are moving into SME lending, and not only SME lending, but UK government-backed business loan programs as well. They got accredited under both of the UK government-backed business loan programs. And they are providing really great pandemic support to business customers. And also Anne Bowden, who you just got introduced to, CEO of Starling Bank, said some weeks ago that they are back on track to be profitable by the end of this year. Moving on, we also have to see that there's an emerging new wave of neobanks. It means that there's a second generation of neobanks. It's not only just neobanks as such, there are different generations and waves of neobanks. And right now, there's a really, really great and interesting wave of neobanks where there are two main notions in mind. Firstly, they are laser targeted and they are specializing in a niche segment. That's what we are also doing with Stripe, for example, focusing on one niche segment, family banking. What Atom Bank is doing, they have one really unique value proposition, fixed term savings accounts, and that's luring in and attracting hundreds of thousands of customers. Also, Bank is having an amazing green banking offering. You have to just pay like 20 euros for a premium account, and they are compensating your carbon footprint by actually planting trees in your name. So it's really interesting to see these neobanks from the second generation of these players as well. We've been talking about fintech, neobanks, some misconceptions as well as banking as a service. That's also really, really important from Revolut's perspective and all neobanks' perspective. And right now, I'll just hand it over to Krisztina to talk about further aspects of actually analyzing the user interface of such digital players?
Yes, thank you, Iván. Just let me quickly share my screen. And it was a really insightful walkthrough, so thank you for that. And before we dive into analyzing Revolut, first I would like to give you a really quick practice activity. Please open this Miro board. We posted the link in the chat, I think. Let me just check out the chat. Yeah, you are arriving, great. So as you can see, I already set up some sticky notes for you, but you can quickly generate new ones by copying the existing ones or just pressing down the N key on your keyboard and clicking on the screen, or you can select it from this menu on the left. So my question is, what do you think what UX audit is about and what methods or aspects could be included? So let's say I conduct a UX audit for you. What do you expect it will cover? And I just quickly start the timer now. You have 2 minutes to come up with some answers. And by the way, it's also a great practice to always lock your layers and frames and everything inside Miro, so that participants won't accidentally move it. So you have around 25 seconds left, and it's so great that you provided this many answers. So time is up, and thanks everyone for participating. And as you can see, there can be really a lot of aspects and methods, and there is not an agreement. It's not really an objective thing what is included in this. Wow, it's really nice that you even mentioned psychology and mental models. Yes, usability testing, microcopy, competitor analysis, heuristic analysis, content audit. Yeah, even checking out the user journeys and performance. Thanks so much. Let me just show you what I prepared in advance, but by the way, your answers really nicely complement my pre-written answers. And I listed out some names for this activity, so that if you are further interested in this, you can search you can search these terms. And here are my solutions, of course, what might be included. And except for the first impression walkthrough and the heuristic analysis, I won't talk about the others in more details here during this presentation. But I would like to highlight one thing. that a UX audit shouldn't exist in a vacuum. So you should conduct stakeholder interviews to learn about the business goals and the target audience, and also about the whole context. And the so-called domain expert or subject matter expert interviews help you understand the domain, for instance, banking. You should learn about industry regulations, constraints, typical workflows, and special terminology, and so on. And of course, in an ideal case, it's good if you can conduct primary research too. And in connection with the stakeholder interviews, I mentioned that it's very important to learn about the context. And what do I mean by learning about the context? Sorry, just let me reposition this. Let me illustrate this with a very simple example. How do you organize a bookshelf? And of course, it depends on your goal and on the context. So if it's for decoration, it might be a good idea to organize your books by color or by spine height. But if your goal is to be able to quickly find the right item, you might want to apply a different so-called organization scheme. For instance, you might want to organize the books alphabetically or by topics, for instance, cookbooks or design books. And another important aspect is how many books do you have, thousands or just a few? So without knowing about the context, your evaluation will have certain limitations. And now I am going to show you what do I mean by first impression walkthrough. Please take a look at this page, and you can also open it in your browser. If you want, it's 3card.org. And just really quickly list out some questions or thoughts or comments that first come to your mind, really just the first one or two. So you can do that now. And Ferry, please mute yourself. Thanks, because there was a little noise. So yeah, if you wrote down your questions, thoughts, or comments, let me show you how I do this and what is my way of thinking. So I always, as you can see, I always create screenshots of the main pages, and I also look at the different viewport sizes. I will talk about this in a moment, but when I am on this homepage, I always ask these questions. Where am I? What can I do here? What is the product or service? Is there a clear value proposition? Who are behind it? Are they credible enough? And where should I grow from here? What is the possible next step? And here I can instantly see that this product is a top-up debit card, and somehow I help reforestation by spending money with this card. And at this point, it's not really clear how this works, and greenwashing is not the most straightforward term they could use, but I understand that it's a free debit card and I can protect the environment by using it. And Iván or Ferry, if you have a comment about this, please tell.
Yeah, definitely. Like green banking is definitely having a momentum right now. There are only a handful of players moving into that space, so there's definitely room for other players. Also, I would definitely recommend for example, traditional banks out there wanting to have a unique value proposition. Green banking is definitely a space that they can move into. Also, Barclays is investing £175 million into sustainability related solutions. That's one thing. On the other hand, also, for example, GoHenry in the UK conducted the research amongst Gen Z customers, and 40% told GoHenry that they actually see that it should be their mission to save the planet because no one else is going to save it instead of them. So definitely green banking is having a momentum, and we will be seeing more and more players moving into this space further on.
Yes, and also one thing I always say to my UI design students while teaching how to design interfaces, that the best way to learn about how to craft UIs in Figma or some other design tools is to really analyze different websites and just really have the time to break down every aspect of it, the headlines, the information placement, and everything. So I think it's a very well practice activity for it. And by the way, Tricard is really like a marble among the uniform app era, I think. It was designed by a famous San Francisco-based agency, Unfold. And I think you will see real gems on the UI.
Thanks for your comments. So to continue my walkthrough, I can tell that Ecosia is the organization behind this. And actually, it's a really good thing that they highlighted this here, because credibility and trust is one of the most important aspects of fintech and banking. Yes, and as I mentioned, as part of this walkthrough, I always create screenshots. And as you can see, I try to look at the smaller viewport sizes. And at the moment, the smallest I like to look at is the iPhone SE. And of course, it's also a good practice to check things out in a different browser. And I won't show you all my comments. You have the link to this Miro board, so you can check them out one by one. And I think that it would be a great sort of homework or practice activity to add your own notes. I spent around 30 minutes on this first impression walkthrough, including the reserve card flow I'm going to show you. So I think there is a much more things to point out, but I will show you some more things. So after understanding what the product is about, I would like to know how this exactly works. And by the way, it's a good thing that the main navigation is visible and, for instance, not hidden under a hamburger menu, because navigation helps you get what the website is about, what the main focus areas are. So it's good for orientation purposes, and it's a good practice to show top-level navigation right away, basically. And sadly, the first part of the how it works page doesn't really tell me more about how this works. It's nice, though, how this little plant or tendril guides the viewer's attention. It uses one of the Gestalt principles called connectedness. We perceive these things as belonging together. And later the page explains that they charge the merchants, and every $60 you spend equals a new 3-day plant. And as part of a first impression walkthrough, I usually pick 1 or 2 key user flows and go through those 2. And here I chose the card reservation flow. And I would like to show you some of my comments here as well. For instance, using descriptive button text is really a good practice, and it's also good that it gives instant feedback to the user on the button itself. And as you can see, I like to add useful resources or links to research that support my arguments. In a real-life project, of course, I would add a lot more of these, but it's just an example. But the main underlying issue in this flow is that there is no expectation management really, because I can't tell how long this will be and what the steps are and what should I prepare. And I also like to include screenshots of the steps that shows a loader screen or things that change automatically without any more user action. And when I encounter a form, I always look at form validations and all the possible error messages and confirmation messages. And for example, here, this field is required, is not really helpful. And one interesting thing I would like to highlight, that after giving my phone number, I should receive a verification code. And after some minutes, this having issues text appears on the screen. And while it might be a good way of decluttering the UI, it doesn't really seem to be clickable. So it's a signifier issue. And later in this flow, after I already gave my address and phone number and name and email, one problem is that I still don't know how long this process will be. And while I already gave them a lot of my data, I haven't got anything yet in return. So to avoid churn, so users leaving your website before the conversion points, you should really carefully decide on what to ask and when. But okay, I fill this in and finally it's done. And here I just want to quickly point out one more thing, because it's a good practice to pay attention to UI components and little details too. Here, this number seems to be like a knob or a handle on a slider, but I can't increase or decrease this number. It's just a decoration, so it's a bit confusing. But even more problematic is that this flow is basically a dead end. Of course, I can share that now I reserve the card, but otherwise, I feel it's a missed opportunity. It would be great if I could, for example, view my forest or check out what Ecosia has done so far. So this was an example of a first impression walkthrough. And as you can see, I could point out a lot of possible problem areas, even though I only spent around 30 minutes on this. And if you do a similar walkthrough, you should pay attention to, for instance, the visual hierarchy, so what elements stand out, what the confusing parts are, and you should also look for inconsistencies, check out the terminology and UX writing aspects and so on. And now, let me switch back to the presentation. I hope you see it properly. And so my question is that, okay, this first impression walkthrough was nice, but what if I want to do this in a more systematic way? And I am going to show you some sort of checklists you can use as a starting point for your evaluation. Nielsen's 10 usability heuristic list was released 26 years ago, and he claims that he derived this from a list of 249 usability issues. And I think it's a good starting point or a good framework for evaluation. And I will show you some examples for all these 10 heuristics during the Revolut analysis. And I promise you, I won't give you a history lesson here, but when I started out in this field, next to Steve Krug's famous book, I, for example, read this guideline, this research-based web design and usability guidelines. And it was released by the US Department of Health and Human Services in 2003. And some of the guidelines are not relevant anymore, but it helped me understand what aspects should I look for on a website or inside an app. And it also taught me that I should apply a systematic approach, and that all of this is based on research and it's not about taste or personal preferences. And there are other good starting points, for example, these 247 web usability guidelines collected by David Travis. One example is that it underlines the importance of credibility. I already mentioned that in connection with Ecosia. The guideline says that it should be clear that there is a real organization behind the site. And one of the largest, if not the largest collection of guidelines is 34 years old now. And of course, it has many parts that are still relevant. For instance, it says that potentially destructive actions should be more difficult for the users to complete. And there are other sources you can check out, for example, the ISO standards, the 9241 ISO standard about usability and ergonomics, or you can learn about aspects from design guidelines, like from the material design guidelines. And there are a lot more checklists or guidelines. So reach out to me if you are interested, and I can send you a list of these so that you can get inspired by them. And one thing to watch out for is that some of the guidelines are a bit obsolete now in these lists. So for example, of course, your links don't have to be blue and underlined. The important thing is that you should be able that it's a link and it's clickable, and the style of the links should be consistent. So my advice is that if you are a beginner designer or someone interested in design, you should read these guidelines and not just read them, but try to use them. For example, pick a website or an app and try to spot the things these guidelines are talking about, just like Feri said. And one more thing is that you should also be a more intentional user yourself. And what I mean by that is when you use an app or a website, switch to your designer mode and analyze the UI elements and ask these questions. What are the reasons behind this particular solution, or how could it be improved? And it's not just about digital products or services, of course. You should notice design decisions using a microwave oven or a desk lamp, or your car, and ask how controls are grouped and what feedback does it give to the users, and so on. And if you do heuristic evaluation as a distinct service, for example, as a part of a UX review package, you should create a framework for yourself or a checklist. And one more thing I would like to really highlight is that we don't evaluate only on a page level or on a screen level. We always look at flows or even journeys, as you also mentioned during the practice activity. And we try to be systematic and try out all the UI elements and different states. And we look at things as a visitor or as a registered user and so on. And now I would like to show you some good and not so good examples from the world of banking and fintech. And later on, we are going to zoom in on Revolut's usability by applying Nielsen's heuristics as a framework. So the first good example is by N26, and this is how the account opening flow starts. And it handles expectation management pretty well, because we can see the main steps here and the estimated time it will require. And the other thing I wanted to point out is this predictive text search that gives you an additional visual feedback. It underlines the characters you typed in. And as you can see, this screen is not that cluttered, and this is because they used progressive disclosure and made a decision of not showing everything right away. And if we click on this, how do I open an account? We can see these details. I would like to really underline here that there is a fine line between displaying too much information, because it creates visual noise, and the lack of information, because it can really confuse users. Yes, and the next example is a not so good example. Hamburger menu is becoming a convention, and of course, screen real estate wise, it might be a good solution, but on desktop, you have a lot of screen real estate, and as I mentioned before, navigation helps you get what the website is about, so it orients users. And one valid use case of hamburger menus is placing rarely used items inside it, but still not on desktop. But let's see what they put inside this menu here. Sadly, it just displays the same icons and labels. And if you open your Gmail inbox, you will find a very similar solution. However, you use your Gmail in a very different way. Probably it's open all day, or you open it multiple times a day. So the usage pattern is very different. And this is exactly why you shouldn't copy design solutions without learning about the context. And Feri has a comment.
Yeah, that so I think it's also a best practice to follow that you shouldn't always copy the best ones or the industry leaders such as Apple or Gmail or Revolut when it comes to fintech products, because you just don't know what your users want on a exact page or a dashboard. So for instance, Apple was strongly criticized because of the lack of contrast on some landing pages and marketing sites. And also, I personally also have a hard time finding everything on the Gmail navigation, yet I'm using it every day. So I think it wasn't a really good idea to copy from the Gmail. And nonetheless, that Gmail was designed to really be able to work on different screen sizes as well. So I think this approach of using the hamburger menu with a collapsed navigation is just simply a little bit confusing on this UI.
Yeah, thanks, Ferry. The next example is actually a good example, and it's Monzo's website. And the value proposition is very short and clear, and it manages to tell you so many things in so few words. And the button text is descriptive. Users are informed about the next step, and the illustration is not a meaningless stock image. It shows an actual screen from the app. And this is a not so good example from Revolut's website. This is the version translated to Hungarian language. And one problem is that this carousel moves automatically. And while it stops when I hover over one card, I can't move it to the right or to the left. And there is also an accessibility issue here. There is not enough contrast between the text color and the background color on this card. And the layout is broken, the button is too close to the button edge. So this is a localization issue. And one example, and this is my favorite from this stack, is from Sterling Bank. And this is their personal loan calculator. And one quite apparent problem here is that there are no labels for the lower and upper boundaries. So I can tell that maybe 500 is the lowest I can apply for, but what is the maximum? And as for the time periods, it's really hard to tell which one is selected currently. And there is also a confusing redundancy. So I borrow money for 12 months over 12 months. And it would be also nice if they made the information about how much it will cost a little bit more stand out. And if I enter a value lower than 500, finally I get the range. So it tells me that please enter an amount between 500 and 5,000. And if I enter, for example, 1,000, the problem is that the position of the so-called knob or handle is disproportionate to the length. So yeah, 5,000 shouldn't be here. And finally, I wanted to include a UX writing example too. And the possibility of freezing your card has been around for years now, but it's still a quite new concept for many users. And here Chime manages to talk about this feature without even mentioning the word freeze. So it's a good example of leaving out unnecessary jargon. And it also highlights the main benefit. You are always in control. And by the way, this is one of Nielsen's heuristics. And now, at this point, Iván will tell you some interesting insights about Revolut and its business model.
Yeah, thanks so much, Krista. And thanks you also for all of these great insights related to UX audit. Right now, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we will dive into the business implications of Revolut's business. And we'll start off with some really quick snippets, some quick insights and facts about Revolut's business, and we'll put these into context quite soon. So Revolut was actually founded in 2013, what was actually launched in 2015. Nick Storonsky is their founder and CEO. Vlad Yatsenko is their CTO. They had their HQ in London, very important also from their strategies perspective. And they have a staff right now around 2.2 thousand employees. And they only had like 830 employees in 2018. So that's a huge increase from that part of their life cycle. And also they are present in 35 plus countries. They moved into Southeast Asia, Australia. They are present in most of the European countries. And they have an amazing customer base of 30 million retail banking customers. And also, they are not particularly focusing on a business segment, but they still managed to get 500,000 customers from that part. They have an amazing and skyrocketing funding, almost $1 billion, and their valuation is really, really impressive as well, with 5.5 million, sorry, it's billion actually, 5.5 billion valuation. Moving forward, and let's put that into context, the biggest rivals in the UK are here, Monzo and Starling Bank. And it's really interesting to see that, for example, Starling Bank is rather focused on British territories, UK and Ireland. Monzo actually expanded to the US. They are really struggling in the US since, of course, we've got the global pandemic, and that's really not helping Monzo's business at all. Monzo is actually having a customer base like Revolut did in 2018, 4.5 million customers, but Revolut already like almost tripled that amount. And Starling Bank is rather having a really strong, but a smaller customer base in retail. And as I mentioned, it's really amazing to see that Revolut is not particularly focusing on business customers, but they still managed to get 500,000 business customers. The total funding is also really amazing. As I mentioned, Revolut having almost double the amount of Monzo had. And also from the valuations perspective, Monzo used to be the kind of highest valued UK neobank, also with Oak North, but then Revolut just eclipsed the whole UK neobanking scene with a stunning $5.5 billion valuation. Moving forward, I wanted to answer that question right away, beginning of the business implications of Revolut. Is Revolut actually a bank? And yes and no. So the answer is yes and no, since Revolut acquired a banking license in Lithuania by Lithuanian authorities in 2018. And according to EU passporting rules, they could apply that banking license in all other EU member states. However, Revolut started out with a UK e-money license, licensed and authorized by the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, and they just only applied for a UK banking license in 2020. Also really interesting detail that they are also mid-process in Australian banking license application. That's also coming later on. And yes, we'll also mention that they are applying for a US as well as an Irish banking license. But then, is actually my money secured by Revolut with a banking license? Not really, because you have to pay attention to three main entities. There's Revolut Ltd, the e-money institution licensed in the UK. There's Revolut Payments UAB, which is an e-money institution licensed in Lithuania. And there's Revolut Bank UAB, which is the actual bank that lets Revolut, to, for example, roll out cash loan, personal loan, and other types of loan products. So in case you want to check, and you should check, which entity you have a contract with, you have to tap on your profile in your Revolut application, scroll downwards, and then you will see, for example, myself, it was quite obvious that I'm contracting with Revolut Payments UAB. So my money is not actually safeguarded by Revolut. They should actually have no access to my money, and it's safeguarded by Lloyds Bank in the UK. And it's really interesting that they are moving the issue with safeguarding the money to JP Morgan Chase, the largest US bank, in 2021. So that's actually the answer to the question. And we will definitely see more and more passporting issues with Revolut. And I really hope to see Revolut getting licenses from all of their geographical present countries. Having a look at Revolut's product stack is really, really interesting. And as I mentioned you at the beginning of my presentation, that there's the ecosystem-led approach. Revolut definitely applied that approach at the beginning of building out their whole product stack. For example, they started out with a debit card, a multi-currency card, as well as mobile app. And then they slowly and afterwards quite exponentially built out lots of different sorts of financial products. But this is not the end of the story. They are building a super app. And that's not only an ecosystem, as I mentioned, it's rather a super app because they are also touching up on other sectors and other industries as well. Also, as you can see from Sanjeev Kumar's Revolut Deep Dive, who's a fintech influencer, also working for PricewaterhouseCoopers in India, he made an amazing graph here by also listing partner products, for example, rewards, and also Revolut's business app store, as well as we can see that there are some products that are only available for customers that contracted with the banking entity of Revolut. Of course, these are credit cards, personal loans, and current accounts. Moving further, I also wanted to put it into context because firstly, you can see that Monzo, Starling Bank, and Revolut have almost the same offering in case we just have a look at this sheet. But that's of course not true because the focuses are really, really elsewhere. For example, really interesting on the bottom of this slide, that Starling Bank is the only one that actually offers its banking as a service product to other entities, emerging neobanks, emerging fintechs. They have an amazing Amazon Web Services based architecture. And also, it's really interesting to see that Monzo is not into business lending. Starling Bank and Revolut definitely are. And it's also really interesting that Revolut is the only one trading with stocks, cryptos, and also commodities. So what is Revolut's business model? So first and foremost, it's kind of an ecosystem-led business model, starting with a debit card, building out lots of other types of financial services and financial products. Also, it's a lifestyle kind of approach, like N26 highlighted that in their business model as well. So they do not want you to have a problem when you open your Revolut application. They definitely want you feel good once you pay with your Revolut Metal card, once you see your categorization in your PFM tool. And also the super app concept touches up on other sectors and industries. For example, marketplace business, an Amazon-like marketplace business. That's really, really interesting to see from Revolut. And I also wanted to kind of help you understand the unbundling and rebundling approach in the fintech space. So first off, traditional banks created the universal banking approach, where they offered lots of different sorts of financial services and products. They were rather mediocre in each and every service, but they could offer most of the available financial services for their customers. After the financial crisis, lots of fintechs started to unbundle this problem. And they created 1, 2, 3 services, but they were competitive, really, really competitive in these services. But then, of course, they kind of recognized that to build a really sustainable and really profitable business, they need to build around lots of other types of more profitable financial products. So that's really the rebundling approach amongst the neobanks. So right now, most of the neobanks are rebundling, building out lots of other ancillary revenue streams. And that's what also Revolut is doing right at the moment. Putting it into context, once again, really interesting to see the leaders of these banks, how they want to monetize their banks. Monzo is monetizing its solid customer base. They want to push the percentage of the share of their subscription-based approach. Their subscribers should have more and more premium and pro subscribers in the upcoming years. Starling Bank definitely discovered SME banking as a really, really comfortable playground. And that is why Starling Bank is definitely moving into that space. Revolut, as I mentioned, using the super app approach. So they are really distinct from these two players, Monzo and Starling Bank. Moving further, and having a look at the numbers of Revolut, it's really interesting to see that they are still dependent on card usage and interchange fees. Of course, they are, but also 1/4 of their revenues come from subscription-based model. So that is why they are pushing the trading function of the application, because as a standard or premium account holder, you have access to 3 and 8 stocks respectively. And in case you have a Matter card at Revolut, you have access to like an infinite number of stocks. So that's really pushing the subscription amount further. And other revenue streams are also really important to mention, like insurance products, medical, overseas insurance, device insurance, also perks, where they actually generate commission fee from having their customers buying products from other merchants. And as I mentioned, kind of the other revenue streams are also contributing to the subscription-based revenue streams. As you can see, Revolut had a 162 million pounds turnover last year, but they were also struggling with their costs, and we will see how. And right now, I want to ask Eva, our host, to bring you our poll, because I'm really, really interested in your opinion whether Revolut is anytime going to be profitable. So we already see the poll. Thank you so much, Eva. And I'm really interested in your opinion whether Revolut is actually going to be profitable or not. And to help you with that question, I brought to you some really special insights also from Sanjeev Kumar. Revolut is actually reaching economies of scale. They have lower costs per customers, and this is an amazing sign. But what's not really an amazing sign, that they are increasing the number of their customers, but the turnover per customer is not increasing that much. So they have, I would say, and you might say as well, lower value customers right now than they had in previous years. Their administrative costs really have gone up. It means that, of course, they've been expanding, they've been setting up new offices in different countries in Southeast Asia and Singapore, Australia, etc. So definitely that's increasing administrative costs right away. So I want to show you what I am actually most interested in about the future of Revolut. So I really hope that I may manage to summarize you what could come for Revolut in the future. So Revolut has really great positions in the UK, France, Romania, Ireland, and Poland. And Revolut has to defend its position, especially in the Ireland, since, for example, the state-owned postal office and the Post is investing a massive amount into its current accounts app. They want to compete with Revolut because in Ireland, 1 in 4 Irish adults own a Revolut card. So that's really, really a competitive edge, an amazing customer base, and Post definitely has to move further. And that's why they are investing a massive amount of money into their current account app. Also, Revolut should secure a license in the US, because then they would really, really flourish in the US, since, as you might remember, there are EU passporting rights. So once you get a license in the EU, you can passport that license also in other EU member states. In the US, there's a kind of similar approach, while interstate agreements, you can also kind of passport that license. They filed their license, and it's really interesting to see whether they'll get that license or not. But what's really, really interesting as well, that Varo, a great neobanking player, was applying for the FDIC for a banking license for over 3 years. They were applying several times, and they just got their license, but it was a really hefty road, and 3 years, it's definitely a really long life cycle. So it's really interesting to see how quick Revolut can be in terms of securing a banking license in the US. Moving further, yes, they should acquire more and more licenses, since there's a lot to be done. Their competitors rather started out with their own banking licenses, so they weren't really postponing the issue. Monzo, Starling Bank, and N26 Bank, they are all licensed banks with financial compensation scheme in the UK, for example. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see whether the Revolut entity is going to have more banking licenses in the future. And what's really interesting as well, and mesmerizing to see that there's a great example in front of Revolut. And this is, think of an already profitable, super amazing, massive neobanking player in Russia. They have truly end-to-end journeys. In case you want to buy a house, you want to have furniture in your house, you can get your mortgage from Tinkoff, you can get your furniture, your rental services, you can get food delivered to your home by Tinkoff. You have Tinkoff Junior solutions, you have a Tinkoff Marketplace, you have a voice assistant called Oleg. So everything packaged into one super application, Tinkoff. I am personally really, really interested in whether Revolut is going to be the next Tinkoff. And last but not least, this week we had really big news from Revolut. They are recruiting a chief commercial officer. And in the job description, you can see that the chief commercial officer should generate $100 million in annual sales. That's a big thing and a big promise from the job description. They want to move into the marketplace business since they are still not profitable, a loss-making company, and that's really an opportunity for Revolut to get profitable right away. It's been really a pleasure to talk about Revolut with these implications, and I'm really, really happy to give back to you the word, Krisztina and Ferenc, to talk about the design implications of Revolut.
Thank you, Iván. I share my screen again. And first, Feri has some comments about the super app concept.
Yeah, so first we read different forums and articles about all this super app of Revolut currently has. This version 7.0, so the seventh actual new UI version of the whole application. And if you see the information hierarchy a little bit, the main functions are the following: dashboard, cards, profile, wealth, and payments. And we try to differentiate between the lifestyle banking function and also the lucrative so-called functions, which generates revenue eventually to Revolut. And we realized that now it's really hard to find that functions you are familiar from the previous releases. So for instance, I have a hard time finding my call-based savings in the vaults, and also it's almost impossible to find the payment limits. Although there are tons of new features and ads in the app trying to drive me to buy crypto, buy commodities, and also to upgrade my account to the premium stuff. So nowadays, I think there are two bunch of competing features inside the application: the lifestyle banking and also the so-called lucrative or general, so revenue generating functions are a little bit competing in the app. So I think I wouldn't say that the information architecture is not clear. I would say that it drives users to make more money to Revolut. Yeah,
Yes,
so I
thank
think
you.
we can go further the design walkthrough. Actually, we analyzed a few user flows in the app and realize how could we a little bit improve the whole experience.
Yes, thank you, Feri. And if you open up Revolut's app, one of the first thing you might notice is that there are no labels at the bottom navigation bar, only icons. And while it certainly results in a less cluttered UI, there is a risk of confusing users and it might cause findability issues. And these icons are not that self-evident. And if we take a look at the material design guidelines, it says that it's best to pair icons with text labels, especially if the icon doesn't have an obvious meaning. And there is research that supports this argument. For instance, Google measured that when they replaced this weird-looking snake, which is, by the way, the handwriting icon, and they could increase user engagement by 25%. And of course, there are certain cases when an icon might be enough. For instance, if it's a well-established pattern and if it's an obvious real-world representation, for example. But surprise, some months ago, Revolut had labels too. And this is why you should always learn about the context and, for instance, conduct stakeholder interviews or look at the data and so on. We don't know why they left these labels out. Maybe they were just experimenting with it. And Feri has an aspect he would like to talk about here.
Yeah, sorry, my connection is not very stable at the moment. But yes, so we as designer, we always try to simplify UIs and in most cases reduce friction, which is some of it a good thing, but in most cases not a very good thing. And there's also a notion called the false simplicity in the UI design. And also, which is interesting, that the NNG group performed a study about whether using labels on the icons or not. And they realized that for icons without the labels, the number dropped to 60% for users who just were not able to realize what the icon should say. So I just want to highlight that it's not always the best practice to simplify everything and create a smoothless experience, sometimes you really need to use some kind of friction inside the app in order to guide users among the user flows.
Thanks, Ferry. And now, as I promised, we are going to go through the 10 usability heuristics by Nielsen. It's just a framework or a starting point for evaluation. It won't be an exhaustive analysis. I just would like to show you some examples from the app. So the first is the visibility of system status. And this screen is from the identity verification flow. And it tells me what will happen next. So it's a good thing. However, the problem is that they placed this progress indicator here, and the percentage didn't change while I was on this screen. So it was quite confusing. What should I do at this point? Should I wait here or not? And by the way, just an interesting fact about loaders is that using a custom loader, so not just an ordinary spinner, for example, actually decreases the perceived waiting time for users. So they feel that they waited less.
Also, you can find great examples on the web. So for instance, it's not visible right now, but if you type in ueno.com,
yeah, it seems that that Ferry has some connection issues, but he collected some examples for you for custom animations. So yeah, hopefully he will come back soon. But until then, I continue with one more aspect related to this first principle. And this is getting feedback at the right time. And so we are still in this identity verification flow, and it's really nice that it only took 3 minutes, but this might be a distraction. It's just something you should think about when you make a design decision similar to this one. And also the terminology is not really consistent here because sorry, I'm just checking my connection too. Yeah, so the terminology is not really consistent because it said identity check and now it says your ID document has been verified. And also, I also feel that this you are good to go is a missed opportunity because it could tell me, for example, what possible next step I should take now. And yeah, just okay. The second heuristic is about using real-world metaphors or conventions or terminology familiar to the users. So using a card illustration is a nice shortcut because it builds on users' existing mental models and prior experience. And one thing that is not really related to this second heuristic, but I really would like to point out, is that establishing a meaningful visual hierarchy is one of the most important things. And I already got my card, yet on this screen, one of the most prioritized options is this track delivery. And sadly, Ferry is not here. I think, Eva, can you check, please, if he can come back?
Yeah, sure. I think he already arrived back. Ferry, are you here? Are you connected?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry. So yeah, I'm back. I really hope that my mobile internet will last for the end of the session. So yes, for this breakdown, we delivered a quick fix on the UI. So I really liked how Revolut did a good job on this screen. Using instead of these small icons without anything behind them, they used a shape. Also, this practice of using small shapes behind the small icons are written in Steve Schroger's refactoring UI book and also among the Twitter tips he has. But also, if you create an eye test, and we try to look at it as a blurry image. So we squint a little. We realized that those two icons are a little bit too highlighted, and we can fix it while changing it to a stroke icon instead of a fill background. And we can play with the saturation of the color a little bit. And now it really blends into the UI, and it's not very in top of the visual hierarchy.
Thanks. And as you can see, this track delivery promises me that I can view the current location of the card. And actually, when I tap on this, it tells me that confirm my delivery address. And then it says that it should have arrived. And the button text is also very confusing here. Got it means that I understand, or does it mean that my card has arrived? And as you can see, I couldn't get rid of this option. It's still here. And yeah, it has a too prominent place in the visual hierarchy, I think. The third principle is that users should be in control, and it means that they should be able to reverse actions or find their way out of something they didn't want to do on purpose. And of course, they can change their mind too. And here Revolut lets me cancel my money request. And by the way, we are going to show you the request money flow in more details a little bit later. The fourth heuristic is maybe the most straightforward one, and it's about using consistency and standards. And to put it simply, you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Jacob's law, named after Jacob Nielsen himself, states that users spend most of their time on other sites, so consequently their mental model and their expectations about how something works is influenced by their prior experiences. And the pin pad is a very simple example for this. We use a grid of numbers, and for instance, we don't write the numbers next to each other along the horizontal line. And one interesting thing about how our brain works is that there is something called declarative knowledge. So for instance, we remember 2, 3, 5, 6, and after a period of applying this sequence, it will become a so-called procedural knowledge, and we will remember the pattern Z. And procedural knowledge requires less cognitive work. So when you display the numbers in different order each time the user opens the app, you introduce more cognitive load. And there are security reasons behind this, of course, but you should be aware of this, this drawback. The fifth heuristic is about error prevention. And for instance, here Revolut instructs me to make sure that my card is present and the details are clear. And it's a nice anticipation of what can go wrong at this point. And asking me to make a new picture now is a win-win situation. It's better for me and better for them too. The next heuristic states that it's a lot easier to make relevant information visible on the UI than asking users to remember it. And I selected two good examples. One is that Revolut tells me my balance when I send money so that I don't have to remember it from previous screens. And in the send gift flow, I don't even need to scan through the screen. Everything I need is displayed on this button. Flexibility and efficiency of use means that you should differentiate between the first-time users and the power users. And for instance, Revolut showed me some interactions when I first visited the account manager. And one more example is this Instagram story-like pattern, and it appeared the first couple of times when I opened up the search feature. And it's a nice pattern, but I saw that it's a missed opportunity because, for instance, it says that the best and fastest way to find what's most relevant to you and even discover new things, that's not so informative, I think. And the next guideline is about aesthetic and minimalist design, but I think it's about relative visibility. So if everything is calling for attention on a UI, nothing will stand out. So the question is, for example, are there any irrelevant information, for instance, on this screen? And you should always think about priorities. And here is a quick fix that Ferry will present for you.
Yes, we also realized that it's good to avoid the ambiguous spacing. So Revolut did a good job creating a background color behind the elements, but there's no clear separator line among each other. So it's not very visible. So it's not very much obvious that this group is one group with each element. And also we decluttered the 3 tips or 3 information from the UI, and we placed a link here. How can I make the most out of my account? And also we changed the background color of the group, because we realized that it's an important aspect, an important group of the whole screen. And one thing which is not very minimalistic, that Revolut uses this kind of tab here, but it's a rather a platform pattern provided by the iOS applications. And I think it's also great stuff that Revolut has a keen eye on the platform patterns and aims to create very familiar context and familiar screens for the iOS and for the Android users as well. So if you just realize that Revolut has an Android and iOS app, you should just compare the 2 different applications, and then you will eventually realize that the 2 applications are a little bit different because of the platform patterns and because of, well, other design decisions.
Yes, and we will show you examples of unnecessary platform differences in a moment. The next heuristic is closely related to the 5th one that was about error prevention. So if we couldn't prevent the error, we should make sure that users will notice that something went wrong, and we should always have them recover from these errors by adding suggestions or showing possible next steps. And what I would like to highlight here, that it's a good practice that Revolut doesn't use complicated or clever language here to explain the error. However, it's an interesting choice that this error message disappears after some seconds. There is a counter, an indicator showing that. And the last heuristic is about providing help and documentation. And of course, the best case scenario is that users won't ever need the help, but when they do need it, they should be able to find it easily, and they should be able to find the piece of information they are looking for. So this is how I get to help inside Revolut. First, I select my profile, then tap on the question mark icon here. And the other interesting thing I would like to highlight is that these unnecessary differences between the 2 platforms, iOS and Android. One is that, as you can see, there is a sequence of things inside help. There is this select an issue, select a topic, chat to us, follow us, and so on. And on Android, the section about transactions is the 3rd, while on iOS, it's the 2nd. But something more problematic is that in connection with chat, iOS uses a good secondary text and tells users that they will chat with a support agent, while on Android, there is no secondary text. So it seemed to be an unnecessary difference, or maybe they are just experimenting with it. Yeah, and Ferry has one more comment about search.
Yeah, so finding the search function is very tricky for the iOS users on Revolut, because you need to push down the whole screen to find your partner you want to send money, for instance. And also Smashing Magazine also realized the importance of placing the search bar in the right place. Also, they actually tweeted about switching the hidden search icon to a very visible state, and it reportedly increased the users to like almost 80% on the website. So instead of using for instance, a website, a magnifying glass, it's better to just create a really visible search button. And on mobile devices, it's better to use an icon and not hiding the search function behind user interactions.
Yes, and these were the 10 heuristics, and I would like to talk about 2 more aspects before we move on to the request money flow. Empty states are a very important but often overlooked parts of applications, and an empty state has at least 3 possible functions. It can be used as a teaching opportunity, so you can explain things to your users. It's a moment you can use for a little delight, for example, by adding a nice illustration or some good UX copy. And thirdly, a good empty state is not a dead end. Instead, it shows the next possible action. And here inside Revolut, we can see that, they are showing usually the possible next steps. However, the information presented, for instance, here about vaults is not that helpful. It says that discover the smart way to maximize your money. And if we take a look at this people near me option, while it explains why it asks for permission, it doesn't really explain the consequences and what does it really mean if I enable this. And data visualization is also a very important aspect. It's also about establishing a good visual hierarchy. And one really good thing I wanted to highlight here is that, as you can see, color is not the only visual cue that compares our spending. It supports users with red-green color blindness, for example, so it's an important accessibility aspect. However, there are some problematic parts here. For instance, the font size on the right of the chart is way too small and there is not enough contrast. And the empty state is not really helpful here. And this no data to display is a bit too robotic. And it's confusing that I could set a budget goal for a time period that has already passed. And it's also confusing that I couldn't change the currency, but later I realized that everything is converted to Hungarian forint. And now we would like to quickly walk you through the request money flow. And what I would like to show here is that it's not that self-evident for first-time users to find this feature. I wanted to request money from my cousin. We ordered a board game on Kickstarter together. And here on the dashboard, I tapped on send. Since I thought that maybe send and request might be a pair, I can switch between these two and sort of change the direction. And when I realized that I couldn't do this, you can see I went to who to pay. I selected my cousin and I didn't find the option. I went back to the dashboard, clicked on these 3 dots, but I couldn't find request money among these options. So then I decided that, okay, I will check this payment screen because the icon also suggested these 2 directional flows. So maybe I can send and I can get money. And on this page, I selected my cousin Bence from my Revolut friends, and finally I could find him here. Sorry, I think one slide is missing. This is why maybe you don't understand what I am talking about. So yeah, after this checking out these 3 dots and the exchange statement details and add new account, then I tried out this payments icon.
So Revolut also said that for the younger generations or millennial users, it's an easier way to communicate among fans in a more funny and like an authentic way. And also Slack provides GIF integrations on the platform as well. And also, I think it's really nice stuff from Revolut that they offer something small feature, but really well used and really great funny stuff for the younger generations as well. So I think this small design nugget is for them, definitely.
Yeah, right. And it's not like the app forces them to use something funny. They can decide if they want or not. And the other thing I wanted to point out inside this flow is this review payment option. So if I tap on this button, I couldn't see it on the payments page. So I can see the recent payments, but this request money is not among us. So I go back to the dashboard. Oh, and I also checked my cousin's screen, and I couldn't see it here either. And I went back to the dashboard, and I still couldn't find this very recent money request. And on the dashboard, as you can see, if I scroll a bit, there it is under the actions. And it's actually a very good example of poorly executed progressive disclosure. You should always signal somehow that there is more. And in the last part of this webinar, Feri is going to redesign some parts of the dashboard. We were thinking about some little tweaks or fine tunes that could make the experience better.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the UI of Revolut and the UI of the home screen. So actually, after the release of the 7th Revolut, there was a viral thread on Reddit by Whip the Man that the whole UI should be somehow changed to the previous one. There's a lot of empty space, and also the junior account cannot be hidden from the dashboard. So users were a little bit outraged after the release, but as Iván said in the previous section of our webinar, that maybe all of the changes and the design decision was driven by the business, and we should see somehow with the business glasses on this whole UI change. and we need to analyze it, and maybe we can also find out how we can make it more usable and more super, I would say. So I always like to analyze and break down the user interfaces, and firstly, I really like to decluttering the UI. So first of all, I love to find visual noise on the sites and on the mobile apps. And you can see that there are 3 different signals saying that I have Hungarian forints on my home screen open. And we have the flag, we have also the name of the currency, and we have also the full name of the currency placed on the UI. And it takes a lot of place. And also it's the top of the visual hierarchy. And because Revolut highlighted it in 3 different ways, the whole stuff is left aligned, which is, yes, platform pattern in iOS, but maybe not the best way on a home screen. The second item of my breakdown is the icons. I realized that the icons here are a little bit tricky. There's a certain visual metaphor here. You can see that there's a graph here, an icon with a bar chart, and somehow it looks like they are connected here. But those functions, I would say, not very well connected, because the first icon is the favorites section. I can see the exchange rate and other functions in it. The bar charts are my transactions. And also these functions here is the wealth function, where I have the crypto, the commodities, and my vaults somewhere on the UI. And also, I think it would be best to, again, refer to Norman's principle that when you design icons on a UI, it's the most important stuff is to realize that whether it is findable or not, and whether it is recognizable for the users or not. And Norman says that there's some kind of an information sent for icons, which means that you can correctly guess that those icons will trigger that functions on the app or not, and whether the icon is labeled with favorites, transaction, and buzz. So for me, and I think for most of you, this section here is a little bit unclear because the icons looks connected, but on a function wise, they are not connected. So I think this is a problem. The third part of my breakdown is the hidden user actions and also the pushy new features in the application. So it was also mentioned in the Reddit thread that you can see in most cases only one transaction. So I can only see my transaction from a market point. And because of the progressive disclosure, the request money function and the exchange function are also hidden. And my question is that, can we maybe ditch this button and place something more essential like request money? Or are the ads really that important on the UI? So I understand that for Revolut is really great if you trade commodities and crypto and you discover gold or silver. But for a daily banking user, placing that many ads inside a home screen, a little bit, I think, a bad practice. And also the junior account is placed here. But in most cases, a junior account is also like, I think 10% of the whole user base maybe. So you could maybe get rid of the UI. So the summary breakdown is that we could try to make it easier to understand by removing unnecessary items such as the junior account, and we can also decluttering the signals of Hungarian forints here. We should apply labels here on the bottom navigation, and we should make the information more visible. we should guide users where are the transactions and user actions. And also, I think it's not a very good point that I also see only one transaction here. So I try to redesign it in a way that I can see even more transactions on the UI. And also I share a quick video shortly. So yes, before diving into Figma, I usually sketch the whole user interface and I try to realize what are the most important aspects of it. I usually do it on my iPad or pen and paper. And I always do some kind of a quick note-taking. What are the main user actions here, like adding money, send, request, exchange, transaction, and the summary. And also I realized that the most important stuff on my really ugly sketch should be the total accounts and the total amount of money I have. And also it would be great to apply more labels on the user interface and also to make more transactions visible. And I also realized that there's a certain business aspect to highlight ads and highlight banners inside the app. So I created a small banner here at the end of it. So this particular sketch will help me redesign the home screen and help me understand the scope of my redesign. So I won't redesign every detail and every color and stuff like that. I will only redesign how the information should be placed in my way. So I kindly asked Eva if she could send my Figma link to the participants, because I will be working in Figma very shortly.
In a minute.
I'm waiting a little bit for all the participants. All right, so before redesigning everything, okay, so I hope that this screen is now shared with you. So yes, before diving into the redesign, I usually create some kind of presets for me. So I really won't do any magic here. I will use platform patterns as Revolut did. So for instance, I will use San Francisco font from Apple for displaying the typography. And I also created like a type system for myself beforehand. So I know that those are the sizings that can be used while designing a native iOS application with San Francisco font. And you should realize that from the 20th size, you should use a San Francisco display font, and under that you should use the San Francisco Pro text font. And I also have some colors from the Revolut app, such as transactions here, like transactions orange, transactions pink, and the transactions green. And I also have the brand blue, the brand light blue, and the brand gray from the application. So I think it's a good way to start to redesigning this UI. So this was the original stuff here. And I will do the redesign in the dark mode, because nowadays it's really a successful way of displaying information in the dark. So dark mode is really a great stuff among apps, but it has certain bad stuff, such as uniform app. So for instance, it's really hard to differentiate your applications while really using dark mode, but that's another topic. So I also have some icons here from the famous Streamline icon set. I also have the Revolut icon, which I maybe use on the UI. So I have some kind of presets in it. I have the original home screens, and also I have my sketch, which is intentionally really ugly, and I think it's a good start. So let's start the redesign. So I will do the redesign on iOS because I'm an iOS user, and for me it's easier to use that platform patterns. And I will use the size of the iPhone X because it's like almost the most common screen sizes nowadays. So I really don't like to start any redesign from the shell, from the icons, but I have those icons in the preset, so I will show you just a little bit stuff, that those icons shouldn't be like both somewhere. You can easily create icons like this. You can see that I have different sizes. I have icons 12 by 12, 32 by 32, and I also have this 24 by 24 icon here for displaying the transactions. So I have this great signifier icons here, but I will show you that it's very easy to draw some kind of icons. I usually start with a frame in Figma. You can just place the A button, and you can just draw a 12 by 12 frame. My way is to always create some kind of stroke so I could see that I'm drawing inside Figma. And Figma really helps me create a pixel perfect icon. So I will just play around a little bit inside, and I will create or recreate this particular icon here. So I just do a thin line here and another line there. And I will finish the icon like this. I will create a rounded cap and rounded joint for it and make it a little bit more thick. And you can see that I easily created the same like previously. And I can also apply the brand color here. So this was just really a practicing activity. And I think it's very important to think in systems while redesigning an application. And also you should create a sizing system beforehand. And it's also great to just have your icons as components in the app. So I will need a profile icon, and I will just show you how to do it very easily. I realized that there's no profile icon just here, and there's no search icon in the app, so I will create them very shortly. So I will use 32 by 32 frame for this icon. I will also just provide a stroke. I think I will use Revolut's best practice to highlight the icons with the background shape. So I will just create shape here. I think it works fine. I will use the brand gray, but for me it will be too strong. So I will reduce the lightness in the color palette a little bit. I think it should work very well. And I will create this profile icon with two very easy minimalistic shapes. I really try to follow Revolut's style while redesigning the app. So for this practice activity, my very minimalistic approach for this app will be these two very easy shapes for this profile icon. So I can use it further on. Yes, but as I mentioned, we really shouldn't start from the shell. We should place the most important aspects of the UI here. I can see that for me, all accounts and the total balance will be very much important here. And I also try to do it with a more visible way, and I try to use a number which is going to be like a little bit of a challenge for me. So I will place I will use SF Pro display from my sizing system. And I will use, so I will cheat a little bit, and I will somehow tweak the reference of my size guide and use 30 pixel font here. I think I will try to place it in the middle. But as you can see that this particular stuff here just simply won't work, because we have smaller sizes here for the small numbers. So I should really bit tweak this item. And I will separate the different informations. But before putting it all inside one group, I will try to like simplify the sizing. So I will use size 17, which should be work here and here as well. And now I create a frame for these three items. I also create some kind of a padding system for these certain informations. Let's create 4.
In the meantime, can I ask the participants, meanwhile Ferry is redesigning, I would like to ask you to write in the chat your key takeaway from the presentation, what you learned from it, and if you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the Q&A section. Thank you very much.
So I will just simply place it right here. And also tweak a little bit the sizing system. So for my purpose, so for highlighting all the accounts number, this should work fine. But I realized that I need the chevron icon also. So I will try to use this chevron icon, but in a more advanced sizing. And I will just put it in the middle. So now, as you can see that I just recreated very easily the total balance of my accounts. And one thing I will definitely need are those buttons, which says adding money, sending, and also I will paste a request here I will reduce the decluttering, and I will place or try to place 4 different or 3 different buttons on the UI. So let's just create a button very easily. Again, I just create a frame, and I will add a brand fielding. I can see that they use iOS patterns again, so the corner radius should be somewhere 16, or maybe a little bit bigger, 18, or you can just play around and realize that it's around 8. So now I have the frame for my button, but I need to put text in it, and I also should change the colors a little bit, because this is very harsh in dark mode. So we can just detach this kind of color. And the really wrong practice would be just color picking this guy here. I really strongly not recommended using it. So I think it's easier to just play around with the lightness. I reduce the lightness to 24 here. And I will just provide some horizontal padding in the app. Let's say it should be 16 and 8 among the elements. And as you can see that there's a text in it and also a certain icon. So let's place small icon inside the button. And also let's place a text from here with a little bit of help of my sizing system. It should be 13. And it should say add money. So I have my frame inside Figma. So I should just place adding money here. I should put it in the middle, removing the boldness of it. And I should use the brand font and the brand color as well. As you can see, I used the brand colors, but because of the lack of saturation, the colors are not displaying very well on a dark background. So I will just play around with the saturation of the brand color. And I just reduced the whole saturation a little bit. And I think I also add some lightness as well. So I have my brand color on dark. So as you can see, I have my main buttons, and I can just easily put them next to each other. But it's also good practice to just create another frame as a container for the buttons. And you can just play around with the paddings as well. You can say that it should be a horizontal one. And the Figma magic here is that if you copy paste your icon, then you can place more on the UI. You can just say that it should be the send button. And also this should be the exchange. Problem we can realize that the request is not displayed. So you should just type request here.
If you would wonder, the redesign process will last for about 5 minutes more. And after that, we will continue. We will start answering your questions. So stay with us.
Yeah, so just very shortly, while redesigning stuff, you should really make mistakes. So for instance, I created this kind of main buttons, but it won't work because it cost me too much space inside the app. So I need to tweak my design a little bit more and try to come up with a different approach for these particular icons. So I will just have my icons from here. So this should be the adding money icon, and those with the brand color should be the exchange button and also the send request one here. And I can just simply create a shape right behind, and also try a different method of using a button. Because of the lack of the time, I will just place my solution, which I designed beforehand for the UI. Displaying icons in this way should be really a better visual hierarchy for this particular screen. So I will just place the main buttons here. Also, I need another text saying all accounts. And I can also just create a new frame. And provide some kind of vertical spacing. So I just redesigned now the all accounts function here, and I think the whole UI is much more cleaner in this very easy like best practice. I will eventually need a container for this. I can just really easily create a new container, and I will just have some kind of similar solution for it. So now you can see that I followed the best practices and Revolut's approach, and now I just redesigned the informations here in the top of the visual hierarchy. And as you can realize that I have a tons of place to just highlight the different transactions. So I need just another text here. And instead of putting the all accounts here, I can just use another label, this transaction then see all label as Revolut did very easily. In order to finish this kind of element from my UI, I will just simply use shapes as a page controller. Those should be light blue. And I think if Revolut wants, it would be a best practice to show some kind of transactional data or some kind of a money management graphs while swiping through the carousel. And another important thing is to just highlight my transactions here. Because of the lack of time, I think I will just start creating these transactions. So before really doing any more complex stuff here, I need to just put a layout grid here with a slightly more visible color and with a margin of 16. Okay, it's more visible now. And I will just place my transactions there. So yes, I have transaction data, which says that I've spent in the Dairy Bistro today. I have my fonts and sizes from the sizing system, and I placed everything on the grid. So I really just shouldn't think about almost anything by designing this application. And I also realized that Revolut uses this pattern, like the money on the right side, But if you realize that if you have a very strong and long merchants, for instance, like fitness page, then you will have a hard time placing this guy here if you, let's say, spend a tons of money there. So now it is very cluttered, and I won't play around with the sizing here, because I think the most important information here is the actual amount of money spent on this particular merchant. So let's get rid of it. So I will just simply use my transaction data here. I will place an icon there. And I also should use some kind of a chevron as a signifier that you could really see the transaction details. Yeah, but if you have enough time, as I did yesterday, you can really create something more advanced like this for your transactions. So as you can see that I have now more transaction item here inside my application. And I can really easily switch from the colors here. I can maybe use some more colors on the app. And as you can see that I created different variants in Figma. So I can have this guy with more text, and I can have with less text placed. And if I'm just placing it on my screen, then all of it is visible. So now just a quick color fixes. I will very easily just paste my redesigned version of the ads. And I can just simply use my version for the bottom navigation here. Now, as you can see that I really like the smart branding of Revolut here. They use the icon here. So they use the logo as an icon here. And I just simply added some labels to it. I also redesigned the icons a little bit to make it more easily understand. And as a final step, I just created a smaller top navigation here with the search button visible. And I just redesigned the whole application in a few very easy ways. So unfortunately, I couldn't show you the whole process in Figma, but as you can see that you really shouldn't just reinvent the wheel and create a new and stunning visual for your application while redesigning Revolut, let's say. You should just place the information in maybe a more logical way. So I think my take on this Revolut design is only tackle the inconsistencies on the UI, and I try to make it more intuitive, and I try to make it more rich in informations. So I, again, just highlighted the transaction items. I placed the ad in a smaller size. I also redesigned the whole all accounts section, and I just tweaked a little bit this navigation right here. So I think it's really not rocket science, but with following the brand a little bit, also the iOS pattern and sketching after this whole heuristic analysis, you can come up with new solutions for different apps. So thank you. That was my part and my take on redesigning Revolut, and also looking forward for the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Feri. It was awesome experiencing your live redesign. Now let's jump to the questions. We have plenty, and but we already reacted to most of them, and you can check our reaction to the feedbacks or a few questions in the answer section. Let me cherry pick. Can I? So my first question would be to Krisztina, I think, from Robert, which is the next one. Krisztina, are you here? Can I ask you this question?
Oh. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Cool. I just saw that you were muted and I was not sure. So heuristic evaluation in Revolut. Any thoughts about you can see only one account at screen? Robert says that he has a euro account. Sister was and his sister was sent GBP pound, and it was quite a long time when he realized under drop down he had additional money in different currency. What are your thoughts about it?
I think that the best solution in this case might be to let users customize this for themselves. So, for example, if I only have a GPB account because I visited my brother-in-law once in the UK, then I don't want to see this all the time. But in your case, Robert, I think it would really make sense to be able to see both at the same time. So yeah, I would use customization for this.
Robert, I hope your your question is answered. I'm going to continue with Jude's question. And you can decide who would like to answer. Does the amount of space left affect how app notifications or in-app notifications display? And if yes, how do I manage this?
I take it. So in most cases, people in Europe read just from left to right. So that's why it's a good practice in iOS, for instance, that we place most of every element from left to right. And also Revolut actually has a very good best practice for displaying notifications. And also the UX writing is very great. They say that you should carry another card when there's a certain maintenance, and they just push your dashboard a little bit down, and you eventually can read the whole notification stuff in a carousel. I think it's a best practice we need to all follow. So it would be very I think inconsistent if we put something in the middle, which is a longer text than this kind of displayed stuff. So you should think about that while displaying important informations. You can try out different layouts. For instance, if you, I don't know if you can follow my Figma, but if you just redesigning a website, there's also a good idea to just place the most important aspect or the headline just here, because that's your most important title. And maybe put some helper text there. But it's also good if you just use this method on the web with a small button here. and maybe a cool illustration there. So I think when designing for the web, both of them is great. But as you can see, I only highlighted the most important information while placing it in the middle. And it's also a good practice that the information can be emphasized not only with sizing, but with placement as well. But because of everything is left aligned, I think this version is easily readable. But there's a certain glitch here that I placed it in the middle, and you eventually focus for this important information as well. But back to the notifications, you really should, I think, follow Revolut's best practice and the left to right version of it, because it's just simply one of the best way I've seen displaying notifications in the banking app.
Nice, thank you very much, Feri. You got a very nice feedback also about your version. I suggest you check the Q&A. The next question will be from Balint, and it's why we using decimals in case of forint at all instead of rounding. IMHO, it's the wrong legacy from bigger value FIAT currencies, where $0.1 has meaning. What do you think about it?
Firstly, just really shortly the design aspect of it. Balint, I really understand your point, and it's totally right. But from the design perspective, it looks just stunning, while Revolut uploads the local currency, and I see that my amount of money just changed a little bit with those tiny decimals. So I think it can be maybe like a little bit of emotional design or delight on the UI. So it's a design decision.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, friends. It was a really great answer. And also adding to that, also Revolut has been really popular for its multi-currency card. So that's why it's really kind of tweaking with these decimals. But that's actually correct. Yeah, you have to round up in case it's a low value fiat currency. So that was a really, really particularly great question. Thank you.
Nice, thanks for your answers. And the next question is from Edith. Is a UX audit effective only when you have a release product, or can you apply this method before the release too?
Yeah, thanks for this question, Edith. And of course, UX audit can be used in a greenfield project too, or when you develop a new feature, because you can use a prototype for the analysis. And just one important thing here is it's best if the evaluator is someone who hasn't participated in the product development process before, so that he or she can look at it with a fresh eye or perspective.
Nice. Okay, we have a few feedbacks too, which we will react in writing, I guess. If you don't have any further questions, we would like to thank for your participation in this webinar. In case you have any questions, please let us know. But we really appreciate your attention, and we really hope you enjoyed this almost 2.5 hours. So hope you'll have a great weekend, and hopefully see you at another time too. Bye.
So thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Have a nice weekend.
Cheers.
Bye.